Maybe one more minute, May, and then we get started.
Yeah, let's do that. Sorry, someone was asking for the password for the webinar, so I think more people are still trying to join.
Sure.
Okay, should we go ahead and get started?
Yep, let's do that.
Cool. All right. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to this webinar on leadership for igniting substantial change. This webinar, as many of you may already know, is part of the Mela Thought Leadership series. And please stay tuned for upcoming talks. For those of you I have not met, my name is Mai Bahgat. I attended the Mela 11 Masterclass, which took place earlier this year, and I'll be your host for this talk. Before we jump in, I wanted to ask that should you have any questions throughout the session, please type them into the chat box at any time. We have a few slots set up, one in the middle and then another at the end, to take any questions. In addition, Dr. Ann has kindly agreed to stay on for an extra 15 minutes at the end, if needed, to answer any additional questions you might have. So we should have plenty of time to get to all the questions. We'll also be looking forward to receiving your feedback in the survey. I'll be sharing the link at the end of the talk. That said, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Ann Clancy, who will be speaking to us today about positive change. Dr. Ann has extensive experience. She is the president of Clancy Consultants, an executive coach and a management consultant. She specializes in strategic planning as well as leadership and team development. Dr. Ann is also a researcher, an international speaker, and an author. She has authored 3 books, one on appreciative coaching, and a second on pivoting. More recently, she contributed a chapter on searching for the soul and finding self in a book on innovations in leadership coaching. Sorry, I'm just admitting everyone joining. Dr. Ann has worked with a wide range of clients, from larger corporations and governmental agencies to smaller community groups and nonprofit organizations. She has presented appreciative coaching workshops around the world and is an international faculty advisor for doctoral students in management and organization development at Assumption University in Thailand. Her doctorate is in human and organizational systems from Fielding University in the US. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome you, Dr. Ann Clancy. Thank you so much for being with us today, and over to you.
Okay, my great pleasure. Thank you very much, May, as well. And also thank you to the Academy for inviting me. I feel very honored to be here. So this is a topic of much interest to me, actually quite a passion of mine. So I'm always very pleased to be able to talk about it. Then to just let you know where I am physically, even though we are virtually, I am in Billings, Montana, that is in the United States. It's a northern state on the border with Canada and in the West. I am originally from the Detroit area, however. I've lived abroad and done a lot of travel with work. So I bring a lot of extensive experience with me, actually lived experience. So I'm here to talk about a global movement. And I know that all of you on the call are also global leaders. You also, move in this sphere. And as an academic and practitioner, I have been involved in this movement that I'm going to talk about for almost 30 years. And at the beginning, it was me learning about it and then applying it to myself, and then me understanding it more and being able to apply it to clients, and then eventually writing about it, and then also teaching about it in different places around the world. So to me, this is one of the single most important shifts that is going on about human change as we head into the future. And it's a movement that is very inspired the way it looks at human beings. So I think it's something we desperately need right now with what is happening today. And so what I would like to ask you to do as we go through this presentation, and I have a lot of material to present because I need to present a certain amount of material for you to get the bigger picture of it. And then, so I have some places for questions, and I will stay after, as May said. So, but I would like to ask you for this session to really think about, you know, a new expansive way of embodying your role as a kind of leader who does ignite substantial change. Perhaps a positive reframing of your beliefs about how you really feel people can change, including yourself at a deeper level. And then understanding how change is about moving energy. So they are the same, one and the same things. And the movement I'm going to talk about is, the way I'm going to talk about it is descriptive, not prescriptive. So, but we are going to start off with enemies of learning. So this is a pre-survey that we sent out, and about 21 of you responded and gave about 36 responses. Because right now we are in the midst of a great change globally, as we can all see, and then in our respective countries as well. And such times usually really challenge us to be able to learn and grow, and we have a choice. Do we constrict or do we expand? And I think it's very helpful in times like this to have an idea of what your blocks may be about learning going forward. So we, May collected the results of the survey, and I've highlighted the 3 that have the most, and you can see numbers after them. So number 5, excluding somatic body learning, 7 of you responded to that one. And so this one is, and I'm not surprised quite a few people responded to it, because this one is talking about that that the body is now, we know, an intelligence. We have a head mind, we have a heart mind, and we have what we say in English, a gut mind. So we now know the research that our entire body is intelligence. So the body can tell us a lot, and many researchers say the body never lies. So there are a lot of things that you can count on in your body that will either warn you in terms of premonitions you have, or that will also enable you to move towards something that feels good, or you sense something that's okay. So it's a very important data point to be able to add to how you go forward with change, is that your body can pick up things that your conscious mind may not. Another very popular one, when I do this around the world, is judging everything all the time. This is one of my personal favorites, in the sense that this is what I do and I continually try to work on it. And of course, if you're judging something, you're not learning anymore, and you just don't listen anymore. Another top one was number 9, confusing learning with acquiring information, but 4 people responded to that one. And that's especially prevalent in today's day and age, because you can access a lot of information out there, and you can access a lot of information about your particular point of view, so that you can substantiate your point of view and not really learn anything. So it is really important to know, am I just acquiring information so that my beliefs can stay unchallenged, or am I really willing and open to learn? I think other ones, I'll just touch on them. Needing clarity all the time. All deeper learning requires confusion. A period of time when you don't know what's going on, you don't have the answer. But if you have the patience to get through it, then true learning can happen. Another one, addiction to novelty. I think that one speaks for itself. And May, anybody have any quick comment or question they want to ask right now through the chat?
Not yet. I think we can keep it.
All right. So this is just kind of to set us off, that we're all open as we go through this today. So I'd also like you to think about, on a personal level, some area in your life where you feel you're being challenged in some way. Could be minor, could be major. And perhaps you just need to do and try something different. So think about how it feels to you to be in this situation. And I'm using that word feel intentionally. Does it feel good? Does it feel constricted? Does it feel expansive? And see if you can identify where you would rather be. If you're in this situation, where would you rather be? And as we go through this presentation, let's see if some of the things that I present about the new science of positive change can relate to your situation. So now I'm going to talk about framing the science of igniting positive change. So this is the movement I'm talking about. And so I want to take you across this conceptual bridge, because this is the very important thing that's happening right now. We are in the midst of this enormous shift. And that is a shift from looking at human beings from a strictly mechanistic, linear perspective, where the metaphor is that we are like machines and that humans are objects and we are problems and we can be fixed. And we can especially be fixed externally. Somebody external to us can fix us. So that is from Newtonian physics. That is the old conceptual basis, which is still alive and well throughout the world. Certainly in the United States, where I'm located, there's many organizations, many leaders who still believe this, that human beings are objects and problems to be fixed. Now, the new perspective that's been coming in over the last almost 100 years, but probably we can say 50 years, more dynamically, is based on quantum physics, of course. And this is a more self-organizing look at human beings. And it's saying that we are life. We are life systems. We are generative. Time is not linear. Part of time is linear, but otherwise it's holistic. And life is living systems that spiral, and that includes us. So in the last 30 years in particular, some very exciting shifts have happened to move us all. And I just happened to come in as a professional, in this field, just as all of this was going on. So, I myself have been part of this movement. So as I talked about initially, this major shift from a mechanistic look at human beings and the world to a self-organizing one or quantum one. And the mechanistic one is very much a perspective that things are fixed. They cannot be changed easily. We now, of course, are living in a world where things are changing constantly. And much of that we have been informed and moved by the whole digital transformation. So technology has moved us, whether we want to or not, to this new world. So this is my major aim right now in my life, is to help people move into this new perspective of human beings. Because it is, looking at the next bullet item, a generative perspective. It's a process perspective. We are not fixed. We are capable of change at any moment. Also, shifting from being externally driven, that people tell us how we should think and do, to being internally driven. So we now know through neuroscience and much other research in this area that people are most significantly motivated internally. So if we can tap into that, people are willing to change. We're also moving from this negativity bias, which I'll talk about in a minute, in terms of based on how we survive as human beings, to realizing that there's a lot of positive about life and that we need to focus on that consciously to balance that out. And then the movement from thinking the mind is separate from the body to now realize, no, our knowing is embodied throughout us. Remember the 3 different brains? And then moving from this linear time to quantum time. And I will be talking about all this in more detail. So this is kind of a flow of the science that has been occurring over the past almost 50 some years, beginning in the 1960s, right through, I've included appreciative coaching, but of course things are continuing to change. And neuroscience has contributed a lot to this whole movement. So this is a very substantiated, solid, evidence-based science on positive human change. It is now around the world, and I am just one of many people that are contributing to this. And I'm not going to take the time to go through these, but afterwards I'm happy to answer any questions about this. So let me now get into the key principles of positive change. because I'm going to give you 5 of them. They're 5 generative principles. But before I do that, I'm going to set it up a bit about beliefs, because your stance as a leader, manager, what are your beliefs about change? So that's something really important to do at this point, because we have a lot of unconscious beliefs. And if we're not challenged about them, then they do affect our behavior and our actions, and we are unaware of it. So beliefs are the lens and filter that we have on the world. So literally, what we believe is what we see. So scientists go as far as to say we behave congruently with what we believe 100% of the time, which is amazing. Beliefs also direct attention. They're attractors. So we tend to look for things that validate our beliefs. Our beliefs are constructed over a lifetime, but in our early development, we had these deeper, more unconscious beliefs that oftentimes guide us, and we simply don't know about them at the conscious level. So to help people change at a deeper level, we have to somehow get at their beliefs. And oftentimes you can't do that directly, but you can do it indirectly. And I'll talk about that. So, but mainly that that beliefs impact how we engage in life. So if you look at this picture, what do you see? You only have to look at it about 30 seconds to realize that the elephant's feet just do not stay fixed at all. They keep moving. So I'm using this as a metaphor for showing you that beliefs about human change from the past, this mechanistic paradigm, it said what you see is what you believe. So that things are fixed. So this really shouldn't be happening. How can it happen that you can't fix on the legs of the elephant? You can't make it stay. So we don't live in that world anymore. But in this world, it was very much a fix-it deficit perspective, very much external control. And if I was a manager or leader, I couldn't fix. There's something wrong with my people. They are problems to be solved. And like I can get in there and I can tinker with them as if they were a machine and try to fix them. So if any of you have tried this perspective over many years, you will know this is a difficult one to really make happen well. So this is more the world that we live in now. So look at this top one a little bit, and the longer you look, you'll begin to see things that you couldn't see at the beginning. As you can see, all of these pictures have some movement involved. The more you look at them, the more they reveal. So this is the world we live in now. And so you can see in this one, hopefully most of you can see a picture of a woman. Up here, it gradually reveals to you that it's a woman sitting in a chair in a room. And this one, you just go right into the spiral and keep moving. So this is the new perspective of human change. What you believe is what you see. So this is the self-organizing perspective, and that we have an inner process that grows all the time, and it grows in response to the outside world. But we are literally process and a set of relationships, and we're always in movement. So as a result of that, inner growth can be transformational. We can even anticipate it, but we cannot plan it. In the old perspective, we thought that we could actually plan people's change, but we now know that that's not possible. So the new metaphor is that people are like a garden. So they're always growing. They have an inner sense of control, and there's a strengths perspective. We want to grow people's strengths because they are not objects to be fixed. They are not inherently problems. They are inherently mysteries to be appreciated. And as anybody, especially if they get, as they go through life, even to yourself, you know yourself better in some ways, but then you know yourself not at all in other ways. So there is no end. We are literally a mystery. So this is the first generative principle I'd like to give you, and this is a constructionist principle. And if you take nothing away from today but this, and that is what we focus on grows. Whatever you see and focus on, you will grow that. This is now substantiated by neuroscience. It is our human design. So whatever we are curious about is what we put our attention on, and that is what we will grow and take action on into the future. So if you look at this picture, hopefully looking at it for a bit, you can see it shifts on you, right? Two different perspectives of a face. Can you see them both at the same time? No, you really can't. Yeah. Your mind and your eye are oscillating very quickly between the two images. I can sometimes see two only because I've looked at it a lot and now I have a memory of it. So I go to my memory picture of it. So what this is saying is you can only focus on one thing at a time. So if you are focused on what you don't want and on your problems, that is what you will grow. Because you can't at the same time focus on the solution and what you want. You must choose. So I'm telling you consciously to really take this to heart, that what you focus on grows. Please choose what you're focusing on. And so this is a tool that you can take away about how important language and communication are. So these are a couple of advertisements, newspaper advertisements, taken from early years in the United States. And at this time, so I think the top one is probably the 50s, the lower one is probably maybe before 1920. But these were social beliefs that people held. People didn't know yet about cocaine. And so they advertised it and people could give it freely and they could give it to children. The top one, soda pop, was considered just fine for young children. Neither of these ads would ever be able to be put out in today's world. People would be extremely upset about it. So always what we are socially creating our reality through our language and communication. So our world is socially created. So even more important, what you focus on grows. So meaning and reality are created through human communication and language. And that I want you to know you now have a choice. You can do shoulds versus want. You can focus on things that are wrong and blame, or you can focus on things that are not working and you try to understand them better. So now I'm going to talk about the second key principle, positive emotions. And this, of course, is a very significant one because this is about it's a change about, it's a whole science of positive change. So the positive principle, another generative principle, says that if we can create large amounts of positive feeling or affect and social bonding with people, they change much more easily. They are more open to change. We know from neuroscience that there is a negativity bias in the brain that is survival based. In other words, we are designed to look for danger. Our bodies, if I were to suddenly scream on this line with you, all of your bodies would react because our bodies are constantly looking for danger. Also, we detect negative information faster than positive. So I'll let you read this. But all of these lead us to be more focused on the negative. And for many years in the field of psychology, that is what researchers did. They focused on these, the emotions of negative, like anger and fear, in order to better be able to describe how people react. So fight, flight, freeze. So there has been a lot of research done on negative emotions. But almost nothing was done on positive emotions until about 30 years ago, amazingly. And then a researcher, Barbara Fredrickson, who's very well known, she now has 30 years of doing research on this. She asked the question, if negative emotions are for reaction, then what good are positive emotions? Why do we even have positive emotions? And so then through her research, we realized that positive emotions are not the opposite of negative, but they're distinct, they're complementary, and both positive and negative emotions are very contagious. So as a leader, whatever emotion you bring into a group, it will be contagious. So negative emotions are for reaction. Positive emotions like hope, joy, they create resources for action. They help build capacity and community. something that is very important for us to know. So this is a tool I'm giving you related to this positive principle, that we now know there is an upward spiral toward emotional well-being when you help people build on their capacity for positive emotions. Negative emotions narrow a person down to be able to react in a very narrow way, in a very specific way. Positive emotions do the opposite. They broaden you out, your thought, your actions. They enable you to be able to play, explore, integrate, and they really broaden the scope of your attention and awareness. So broadening helps people expand their circle of trust, show greater perspective and compassion, and help build resources. And the building helps develop resources, resilience, capacity for inner growth and health. And this is in all areas they've determined: cognitively, psychologically, socially, and physically. So big difference between negative and positive emotions, and how important it is to build on positive emotion. So I believe right here we're going to stop for a few minutes of questions. May, what if, yeah.
A few questions have come in.
Okay.
So the first one, there's an initial question and a follow-up question. Are you saying that our beliefs dictate how we perceive things? Let me just quickly read also the follow-up questions. The follow-up question was, are you suggesting that by engineering or controlling people's beliefs, you can actually influence how people see and react to certain events?
I would say yes to both, right? Yes, definitely. We now know there's much research on the power of beliefs and how much they literally build the lens and perspective on which we look at life. And that, as I said before, they're attractors. Once, especially if you have very fixed beliefs, then you will look for things that support your beliefs. And obviously coercion and suppression exists throughout human history. And yes, of course, people can be controlled through beliefs. However, this is obviously not something that I'm talking about today. I'm talking about the movement, the opposite direction, where helping people, find and be able to grow their own inner selves, that they have the space to be able to do that, they have the space to be able to identify and learn more about their beliefs. And I'll stop there.
Okay, I think a question has just come up based on your answer, which is, how does this apply to change in a group versus an individual?
How does this apply to a group versus an individual?
To change in versus an individual, yeah.
Right, so you've all heard of the expression, I'm sure, group think. So yes, a group can be co-opted to believe in a certain thing if they are fearful, if they truly believe in it and want to support it. If they're fearful and coerced into it, then their true selves go underground, so they're no longer really being there as who they are. They're being more like a robot and following others' thoughts.
Okay. Then there's one more question relative to Geerthoffestides, onion metaphor, and neuroscience aside, how does the unraveling of self in light of manifestation of mind and our intellectual challenges say, case in point, religion, which interlaces with fire identity?
Right. So I'm seeking to present here this kind of global movement based on evidence-based science about the capacity of human beings, our design, So I'm not speaking to particular faiths or religions, of which all of us have. There's a range of them that exist in the world. So all of those play a role, in a human being growth and development. So we're all raised by families, we're all raised in cultures, we're raised in societies, we're raised in certain countries, certain parts of the world. So all of that, of course, adds to who we are. Some of it we have no choice about until we get to an age where we might want to question those. Some people never question. So that is all part of the growth and development of being a human being.
Okay. Maybe we can take one more question.
Sure.
So we have one saying, can you elaborate on your garden metaphor in which you plan your gardens versus the idea that you can't predetermine the outcome of change.
Right. And so this metaphor that they're using, that the human being is a garden versus a machine, means that with the machine, it was very much a perspective of human beings that they were fixed and they could only grow so much. And then as they got older, they would have less capacity. But now we know from neuroscience, there's neuroplasticity. I didn't say that correctly, but that we can change right up until the moment when we pass over to another world. So we know that is no longer true. And so the garden metaphor is, if you look at a small child, a baby that learns to walk it endlessly, you know, I have a daughter, they pull themselves up over and over again until they stand. They are inwardly driven. So what we're saying is that with this science, we continue to be inwardly driven throughout our lives. So we continually learn and grow. It is a part of being human. And if we do not, it's because we were suppressed in some way, but is a natural capacity of human beings to learn and grow. All right, we'll come back for questions later.
Yes.
All right, now move forward to the third principle of positive change, inquiry. All of these are so important. And this is called the simultaneity principle, because what it says is that any inquiry actually equals change. By the very first questions I ask a person, I will lead them in a certain direction. So the old way of looking at change is that, you know, you identify there's a problem and then you try to explore what's causing that problem. And then maybe you come up with a couple of solutions and then you try out those solutions and then change happens. But we're saying in the quantum world, it's not linear like that. It doesn't work like that. By me, even just talking to you, I'm already influencing some of you in terms of a certain direction to think about change. I'm not manipulating, but I am influencing you. This is what we all do. It's a human capacity. So what questions we ask literally cause the change to begin. So here's a tool. And the art of the question and inquiry are very, very significant to help people grow and learn. So if you want your employees, your peers, you know, your family members, your society groups, etc., to be able to learn and grow, then what kinds of questions, what inquiry are you using? Because inquiry stimulates the mind. So on the left, this would be a problem way of looking at things. This is what, and remember, I'm talking about human change here, not technical problems, right? This is all human change. So I can ask a client in front of me, what's your problem? What are you trying to fix? What's wrong with you that you want to change? What do you think the causes are? You know, what's your plan for moving forward? Is your plan working? You know, what are you going to do next? Or I can ask these kinds of things. Okay, I see you've got a situation you want to change. Well, tell me, what are your talents? What are your strengths? What are you already successful in that we can maybe apply to a new way of you doing something? What are you aspiring to? What's your dream moving forward? What's your solution? What do you need to pay attention to move forward? And then how would you define, you know, practices of things that you can do that can sustain you? So you can just look. It feels different whether you go to the left or you go to the right. The left takes you a bit of a spiral down. The right gives you a bit of a spiral up. So inquiry, the kinds of questions you ask, extremely significant. Next principle, and that is around the power of vision, and it's called the anticipatory principle. So here's another thing about how we are hardwired. So we are hardwired as human beings to anticipate the future. So we walk around almost as if we were a projector on a screen, anticipating what's coming. And we anticipate it, of course, based on the present and the past. And this anticipation is a natural part. So those of you listening to me, some of you are thinking, you know, what am I going to do later tonight? Or what am I going to do tomorrow? Or I've got work on next week, or am I going to go on vacation? Or our minds are always wandering and anticipating. But the significance about this is if you don't consciously create a vision or a picture or a solution of where you're going, then your mind recreates what it already knows. So that is a significant difference there. So you want to be able to create a conscious picture of the solution or dream or desire that you want to move towards. And this anticipatory principle works from a quantum expanded perspective of time. So remember, linear time is just one small aspect of a greater holistic time. However, the mechanistic perspective said that was the only time, but we now know that's not true. So we know that we as human beings, we only live and breathe in the now, right now. I'm talking to you, we're all living and breathing right now. So when I think about the past, when I have memories, I go to the past from the present moment. In fact, neuroscientists on memory now talk about how the memory is dispersed around the brain. We don't have little boxes that we go to where our memories are, that we pick it out, we look at it, and we put it back in the box, and it's always the same. What they're telling us is that literally we reconstruct our memories every time we go there. We reconstruct them from the present time. We also create the future in the present. So the future isn't out there and then we bump into it. No, we are creating the future right now. So everything comes from the present moment. So as a result, your past does influence you moving forward, but equally valid is what's happening to you in your present life and what's happening and what you are seeding for the future. So you have lots of influences, but they all occur in the present moment. And so here's a tool I'll give you that hopefully illustrates this. And so this is a grow model versus a gap model. So the old way of looking at human beings was very much a gap perspective. You set your goals and there's a gap between where you are and where the goal is that you want. So I'm going to give an example. I had a client, he was a president of an economic development organization in the Seattle area. And I was approached by the board of directors to help him, coach him, because they literally used this word. They said he was deficient in how he handled his employees. He was a great president, they liked everything, but they thought he was deficient. So of course, that is not a good way to begin coaching, especially if you're an appreciative coach. So immediately, he was obviously not very open to this because he'd been told he was deficient and there was something wrong with him. So I had to, explain to him the approach I take and that, he's not a problem to be fixed for me. He's a person who's here. We're all here to grow and develop. So I asked him, where would you rank yourself on a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of how effective you are as a manager? And he thought for a moment, he said, a 3. And I said, okay, a 3. Now, if I was following the gap model, I would say to him, oh, you only are a 3 and you've got to get to a 10. Wow, we have a lot of work to do. Good luck with that, and making a joke. But I don't, I come from a grow perspective. So I said, okay, tell me, why did you select 3? And he said, well, I just had a retreat session with my employees and it went well and people participated. I know I'm a good manager, I'm a good strategist, etc. So I know that I'm not terrible. And I said, no, you're not. Great. So what we will do is we will now work to grow you from a 3 to a 4 to a 5. There's no gap. We're only going to grow you. Why? Because what you pay attention to grows. If we look at the gap, we grow the gap. If we look at the 3, then we can grow the 3 to a 4, a 5, and a 6. So the last principle, and this is around the power to choose. And this is called the Poetic principle. And it's called the Poetic principle because it's based on the idea of when you read a poem and how a poem can be interpreted. So let's say you have a favorite poem and you read it when you're 15, you read it when you're 25, when you're 35, when you're 45. You're at different stages in your life. So each time you read that poem, you're going to have a slightly different interpretation of it based on your lived experience. So what this principle says, excuse me, is that we always have the power to choose in our lives. We can always change. We can always reinterpret our life and move in a different direction. So we can rewrite things. For example, oftentimes people go to therapy because of some trauma that they had. If the therapist can help that individual see the trauma from a different perspective, see it as something from which they can learn, then it becomes a learning experience and that trauma shifts for them. They can reinterpret it. So, and this is the same principle that applies to organizations. We all live stories and we can change our stories. If we have a highly negative story, if an organization has a highly negative story, it can be changed to a more positive one. And the tool for this one is a very key tool, really the basis for all of this. It's called pivoting. So any of you who might know basketball, you dribble, and then if you shift suddenly in a different direction, or you watch a ballerina dance. So pivoting is a movement, a shift to a different direction. So in my line of work, when I work with organizations and individuals, I use it to point out this movement, that it's an approach, it's a tool, and it can really help ignite substantial change for people. Why? Because I'm helping them shift their attention away from what they don't want to what they want. Most people know really, really well what they don't want, but if you ask them, what do you want? They oftentimes don't have an answer because they have not put attention to that. They put all their attention into their problem story. So this pivoting allows us to be able to reinterpret. So kind of bringing this all together, leadership for igniting substantial change. This is something that I've been working on quite a bit. And so I'm really, I love to present this because it's really a very different perspective. So on the left-hand side is how we have looked at human beings, self. So we saw human beings as objects. So I'm going to go down the left-hand side. And discrete objects is that. So we're standalone objects and we're matter. So we're more or less fixed. We're not very mutable. And it was believed that we could look at the world and other people from a very neutral perspective. It also involved in this perspective that we all have our problem stories. And if we put a lot of attention to our problem stories, then they get weightier, they have more mass. And the more weight that this problem story has, this thing that isn't working for me, the heavier it is, the harder it is to move. So, and then the more resistance that's created with it. So I end up being stuck with my problem story and it gets heavier and heavier as I move through life. Also, this perspective says that we can be neutral around other people. I can look at May, for example, and I can just be completely neutral about her, just whoever she really is. And then finally, that we think that we could actually lead people by observing them and witnessing, but that we don't have any influence on other people and that we share no responsibility, especially our employees, for example, or our clients, for the results that they end up with. So now let me shift over to the other side. So this new quantum perspective, generative, is that we are not an object at all, we're process. So you can't take us out from the web of our relationships and the environments in which we live. So we are dynamic energy-based beings. We are energy because from the quantum perspective, everything is energy. So as a result, we can observe other people, but we can't not participate in that because we are sharing this energy. And if I have a problem story from this process perspective, if I just help shift myself or my client or my employee away from the problem to a solution, I can eliminate a lot of the resistance. So instead of the weight, which is connected with matter, which is connected with Newtonian perspective, gravity, weight, we can see, oh no, things are dynamic and always in movement. Human beings are always in movement. And if we can shift people to look in a different direction, the resistance can fade away and they can move forward. And the other thing is that we are always within the context of other people. We cannot separate ourselves out because we are all in the same energy. And so we really lead people through a kind of co-creation between the parties, whether it's a group or two people, that we are both together observing this reality that we're in, and we co-share the responsibility for it. So this might be somewhat interesting to you, so I'd be happy to answer questions about it. But this is a newer development and a very exciting one about looking at human beings. So the tool that I'd like to give you is global leaders, is that when you work with human beings, what you are really doing is you are facilitating energy and influencing energy, because humans are basically dynamic energy-based beings. We are not fixed. We are process. We are not objects. We're not separate. Our lives are embodied in energy and movement. Because in English, if you think of it, we have quite a few words that talks about when we are stuck in our energy. So if we, actually in English, we use the word, I'm stuck, I'm trapped, I'm caught in this type of thing. So if we're not moving, we're stuck because our natural state is movement. We are constantly making meaning of the life around us. And when we do that, that is a movement. And people change through this inner self-organization, but we as coaches, leaders, managers, consultants, we can influence, we can support, we can help people. So we really do energy influencing and facilitating. And I'd like to end with having you just take a minute to look at this and rank yourselves. So on the left-hand side are descriptions of human change, and the right-hand side are others. It's a continuum. So as you read through it, just see, are you more on the left-hand side, more on the right-hand side? There is no right or wrong here. These are just different perspectives about human change. So, when we go into the part where we, which is in this minute, where we answer questions, so anything you want to ask about this, I'm happy to respond to. So I'll give you a minute with taking that. Maybe another minute. And I have sent this as a PDF file, this PowerPoint, so I'm happy to have it distributed to all the participants. Shall I move on? What do you think, May?
Yeah, I think we can keep going.
Okay. So just to put this up for a couple of questions, but now, opening it up. But I would love to know what about what I covered so far has relevance to you, to your leadership stance. what might surprise you about this science of positive change, and of course, any other questions that you have.
So maybe if people could share their comments or responses to these two questions in the chat box, that would be great. I'll give you a minute to do so before I read out some of the questions that came through while you were talking. Okay, it looks like we have just a couple questions. So what practices can one use to shift from seeing people as problems to a more generative perspective?
Okay, one are the 5 principles that I just gave you. So, you know, certainly being very clear on what you focus on grows. The kind of inquiry or questions you ask people, because that can definitely help. And simply, you know, bottom line is simply looking at your, main thing is, you know, those of us who do change, or leaders and managers, etc., we are the instruments. So, and, you know, our beliefs are, you know, guide us. So the more you know about yourself, which is an endless task, of course, then the clearer you will be about how you relate to other people, the impact you have on other people. So I would say the very first step would be learn more about yourself. What do you truly believe about change? I mean, do you think that you can change? Because if you don't think you can change, you're hardly going to be able to help somebody else change very significantly. So that would be my answer so far.
Okay, thank you. Then we have a comment. Bill Starnes was saying, check out the book, Surfing the Edge of Chaos, for a systems perspective on change. It talks about the change in perspective from a Newtonian view to a quantum view. I'll just read out the title again, Surfing the Edge of Chaos.
There are literally hundreds of books written about this, hundreds, probably thousands. So anybody who wants to, feel free to contact me. You know, there's my email address. And I'm happy to give any suggestions I can as to reading, etc.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions that have come in now.
Okay.
So I always thought that change requires a change in mindset and change in knowledge or experience. Do you agree? What is the relationship or applicability of these to different aspects of change?
Yes, I mean, a change in mindset would be a change in beliefs. Absolutely. There's actually a number of different ways in which you can approach people to help them change. One of the most significant ones is people's thoughts and beliefs. And of course, they often define beliefs as just thoughts that are thought over and over again, but they're, you know, obviously very strong thoughts, and they become beliefs. So yes, a change in beliefs is very important. You can also approach people through how they're feeling. So if people seem to be stuck and they're not, you know, they're feeling frustrated, then that's sometimes a place to help people move. Another place to help them is their the actions and behaviors. So let's say they're doing certain actions and behaviors that are preventing them from being promoted or doing their job, you know, effectively. Then talking to them about their actions and behaviors can then help lead back to how they feel and then how they think or what their beliefs are. And another way you can approach people is through the results they produce, because some people do not produce the results that they would like. They think one thing, but they actually do something different, and the results are unwelcome. So that is another way that you can talk with people, because all of this is a self-reinforcing cycle. So your beliefs, your feelings, your actions and behaviors and your results, they can be negative or they can be positive. I can be a leader, or let's say a manager, who looks at my employees as people to be controlled. So that's my thought. They're separate from me. They're a headache. They're a lot of work for me. I'm not comfortable doing this. So my feelings towards them show. I'm frustrated with them. I'm angry with them. And then my actions and behaviors, I'm probably not coaching them or encouraging them, helping them to understand, where they are and how they can move forward. And then my results are that I don't get along with my people. They're not doing what I want them to do. Then that goes back up to my beliefs that, my employees are my enemies. You can have that negative one, or you can have the positive one, where I'm a manager and I believe that my people, we are a team and they are essential to my business to get things done. So then my feeling towards them is much more open. I'm, maybe if not joyful, I'm certainly, I have optimism about them. So my actions and behaviors are likely that I'm going to be coaching them, helping them, asking them questions. And the results are that they respond more positively to me. And then that goes back up to my beliefs of like, yes, we're a team together.
It sounds like it can be a vicious loop or a positive cycle. Ultimately.
Exactly.
Okay. So we have a few more questions. So as Anne said, this has been around for 30 years in the world of psychology, but has been much slower to move into the world of business. Any thoughts on accelerating that transition to business?
No, actually, it's been in the field of psychology when it began with solution-focused brief therapy. But actually, as a movement, it began with Appreciative Inquiry, which is an organizational movement. So the major path forward with this whole movement was from the organizational perspective, not the psychological perspective, because that began in like 1987 with David Cooperrider, Appreciative, was now spread around the world, and from which Appreciative Coaching is based on Appreciative Inquiry. But the positive psychology really emerged around 2000. So, and then also there's positive organizational scholarship that comes out of the University of Michigan. And this is also an organizational change effort. It did not begin as a psychological one, but now it appears on all fronts. Much of social science now is moving in this positive science of human change. And there's much more involved: social constructionism. There's many other areas that are involved in this movement.
Okay. Then we have a couple more questions. And you alluded to a strengths focus. Could you elaborate a bit more on that, please?
Right, because I don't know if you have heard of Gallup. They're quite well known now. They've done a lot of work in the area of looking at human beings from a strengths perspective. They actually have an assessment called Strengths Finder. I use it a lot with organizations, teams, with my coaching clients, and taken literally by millions of people around the world. I had a young manager take it when I was working in Nepal. I was there and he took it. And so, transcultural. And it talks about how human beings do have a particular design that we come up in with, and we have a particular design in terms of, natural talents that we have. And if we're able to express these natural talents and build on them, then they can become our strengths. So this is something from an organizational perspective that you can help people identify their strengths and then help use those in your business. It's a very significant development and very helpful.
We actually did a strengths exercise as part of the masterclass.
Yeah.
And I believe everyone on the call has.
Exactly. And then there are other ones. I just picked StrengthsFinder because it's one I work a lot with, but there are, other ones as well. So, but the whole thing towards, instead of focusing on what's wrong with people, let's focus on what's right with people and how can we work with their strengths.
Okay. Maybe if I could ask a quick question, could you maybe give us an example of your work with various organizations or teams where you've used the 5 principles and how they've led to change?
Okay, so it's kind of interesting to hear how I got into it, because I was getting my PhD about the same time as David Cooperrider. He's the individual who helped formulate the Appreciative Inquiry perspective. And so at that time, we learned that the metaphor for an organization was that it was a problem to be solved. And so I was a consultant, so my job was to go in there, help them identify their problems, and then help give them the tools so that they then would be able to go on and deal with every other problem that came along, because it was a problem focused. And then David Cooperrider in his work helped switch that to, why aren't we focusing on what people are already doing well in organizations? Why aren't we focusing on their successes? Why aren't we focusing on, a vision for the future? There was visioning, but the visioning always started with a statement of the problem. So he shifted it to, let's not begin with the problem, right? Let's begin with what's already working well. So when I heard about this, I thought it was too good to be true as an organization development consultant, a management consultant, but I was very intrigued by it. But then I was invited to join a research project, and that was taking these principles of appreciative inquiry to see if they would apply in a one-on-one coaching relationship. So I began immediately to apply the aspects of that, including these 5 principles, to all of my strategic planning projects that I had, because that's one of the major things I do is strategic planning. And the very first time I did it, from the very first meeting, the change was so astounding that I was sold, because I began by getting them into groups and beginning with, what's working well. Let's describe some peak experiences we've had in the organization, that type of thing. It completely changed the energy of the group. So now, instead of spiraling down, because if you begin with the problem, then with the problem come negative emotions. So there's your positive principle. And down you go, and then you're more in a place of blame. And then because of the constructionist principle, you're focusing on what you don't want and what doesn't work. And then you're growing that. So lifting right out of that, you never ignore the problems, but they will come up, they will become clear, but you focus on your attention on what you want to grow, on finding the solution. Hopefully that. And you use inquiry to do that. So that's the simultaneity principle. So you use them, you just practice with them, because it's the questions you ask. How's my attention focused? Am I taking emotions as a data point? How am I approaching my employees, etc.? Am I angry? Am I upset? Do I believe that I can reinterpret things, that we can change things? And how am I anticipating the future? What conscious picture am I creating?
Thank you. Thank you for that example. Okay, we have a question. What's your distinction on change versus transformation? Is there a difference between those 2 concepts?
Right, yeah, that's interesting. I've had that question before. So I guess you could think of change in terms of a continuum, right? At one end might be more little changes. What do they call that? And it's going step by incremental change. And at the other end of the continuum can be transformational change, meaning people change at a fundamental level. So I think the major difference is transformation is like a big change. And it's usually a change related to a person's identity in some way. So maybe they move from being wounded to more functioning. You know, they literally change values, perspectives, and maybe something about their identity. That would be a transformation. Other words are epiphany, insights, that type of thing.
Okay. I think we've covered all the questions. There was one question of whether I can share the PDF in the chat. Are you okay with that?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, cool. And your contact information, I believe, was included in that.
Yes,
right?
yes, it's on the last slide. So.
Okay, great. Then I'll share that within the chat. I think that we're good to wrap up then.
You have a comment here that says you didn't cover all the questions.
I think a few questions may have been repeated, so I covered the main ones. I think we're good to go. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Ann Clancy. That was
my pleasure. Thank you all very much for coming. Greatly appreciate being invited. So
it was a pleasure.
Contact me anytime.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.